Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1986 high-flying classic, Top Gun. Now, Top Gun is, in all honesty, one of my favorite films. It's a film that will always have a special place in my heart. I mean, as I'm doing this video right now, I am wearing a Top Gun shirt. I mean, that's how much I genuinely love and appreciate this film. And it's one of those films that made me appreciate and love film in general. I saw it when I was really young. I think it was honestly one of the first films I remember seeing, to be perfectly honest. So it left an impact and a mark on me that is indelible, and it's something that I will always um, cherish and carry with me. So it's one of those movies where it was a special film. It was like a watershed film for me. It's the movie that made me love cinema. The more I think about it, that Top Gun is that film. And I watched this film over and over again when I was a kid on VHS. I couldn't get enough of it. I wrote my name on the VHS tape. I remember even taking it to school with me. I wore out the soundtrack on cassette so much to the point where my mom had to buy a second copy of it. And I even had a flight jacket. I had a flight jacket like the one that Tom Cruise wore in the movie. And I was like a kid. And I was wearing the flight jacket. And I loved that thing. And it was just one of those absolutely mesmerizing kind of films for a kid, and it was just something that I thought was so cool. And for a kid who was just trying to honestly figure out a lot of things, it was something that I was able to latch onto, became a little part of my identity and who I was. And so yeah, anytime I watch this film, it just takes me back to those good times and to those moments where, I hadn't seen a lot of other films. I wasn't as cynical or I wasn't as jaded as I am at times now. So I see what people mean when they talk about like how certain films are like nostalgia trips, and Top Gun is one of those movies for me. But I don't think it's just a great film because of nostalgia. I think it's a great film in general. The nostalgia just makes it a movie that's more special to me than it might be to other people. Now, Top Gun is directed by Tony Scott, and I honestly feel Tony Scott did a tremendous job with this film. It's got his signature style all over it in terms of the way that it's shot. I love the fact that it seems like almost every scene has this smoky haze, and it looks like it's bathed in the smoke from the afterburners of the fighter jets, of the F-14s. And the way that he was able just to capture lightning in a bottle with this movie is something that is just impressive. And Tony Scott was essentially given the job by the producers because they liked an advertisement he shot that involved a sports car, I think, and it was racing against a fighter jet, and they liked the look of it, and they thought, hey, we think you'd be a good guy to direct this film. And initially, the studio, they had their eyes on other directors. I read something that they actually were looking at John Carpenter or David Cronenberg, which I find to be absolutely insane. I can't imagine anyone else directing Top Gun other than Tony Scott, but I definitely can't imagine John Carpenter or David Cronenberg, and I love both of those directors. But it was just meant to be, and Tony Scott got the job. And I don't think this film would be as tremendous as it is. It wouldn't be as entertaining or as incredible of a film if it wasn't for Tony Scott, because Tony Scott from the very beginning was very committed to this film, and he wanted to make it the best it could possibly be. So much so to the point where he was willing to spend his own hard-earned cash and put it on the line for this film. In the opening sequence, which is shot in the aircraft carrier, Tony Scott wanted to get a lot of shots in, and he had his particular plan in mind. But something happened where the aircraft carrier had to change course, but Tony hadn't finished shooting yet. And he wanted to get the shots, and he wanted to get things done, and he wanted to make sure that these sequences looked the best that they possibly could, and he got everything that he planned on getting. So he wrote a check for $25,000 and put his money on the line to get the aircraft carrier commander to stay on course so he could get those shots. And that kind of commitment from the beginning for any film is honestly kind of unheard of, that somebody would really put that much into the movie. And it doesn't stop there, because he was integral to a lot of things. You know, the iconic sequence with Anthony Edwards singing Great Balls of Fire and playing piano? That was Tony Scott's idea. Tony Scott was listening to Jerry Lee Lewis, and he thought that that would be a cool addition to the movie, and it was a last minute thing, and it was all him. It was something that he thought would be cool, and it turned out to be one of the film's most iconic sequences. Tony Scott is also responsible for the laid-back, chill vibe that the film is well known for, and he did a great job working with these high energy kind of personalities when it comes to the cast members, and just making them gel with one another, and providing them a lot of opportunity to improvise. Because Anthony Edwards has said that the script was rather skeletal, so a lot of the film was these actors improving, just thinking of stuff on the fly. For instance, when Maverick talks about his first encounter with the MiG, when he went into an inverted spin and flipped off the pilot, that sequence has a moment where Iceman, he coughs under his breath and he goes, "Bullshit." Well, that was all improvised. That was completely something that Val Kilmer decided to do on the spot, and it was kept in the film. The laughter from the rest of the guys was completely genuine, and it's those kind of moments that just make the film so special. And the film has a lot of moments like that. And Tony Scott just made that something that was acceptable, and allowed these actors to make the film their own in their own way. I mean, there's another example in the sequence where Kelly McGillis, Charlie, chases after Maverick to tell him that she's madly in love with him. Tom Cruise was supposed to say more lines, but Tom forgot his lines, and he just decided to improvise and kiss Kelly McGillis. And Tony Scott kept that in the film, and he also loved it. He loved that scene. He thought it was even better than what was in the script. So there's just a certain flexibility to this film that was enabled by Tony Scott. And it also helps that Tony Scott is just an amazing filmmaker in his own right. I mean, the way that he shoots the dog fights and the action sequences and the scenes of Tom Cruise on the Kawasaki, and even sequences that take place in the bar where the guys are singing that song, "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'." It's a movie that looks great. and makes you feel great. And it's just a movie that, like I've said before, it was lightning in a bottle, and Tony Scott was in a lot of ways one of the main people responsible for capturing that lightning. Now, the film also features a script by Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr., which is based on a article about the real life Top Gun school and some of the pilots that were attending the school from California Magazine. This article came out in like 1983 and was a pretty big hit, and that led to the script being written. And initially, the script is very different. It was more of an ensemble film. It wasn't really a Tom Cruise vehicle, and I think it still would have been good, but I don't think it would have had nearly the impact that it wound up having on audiences if it was more of an ensemble film. It definitely wouldn't have catapulted Tom Cruise to the stratosphere when it comes to his stardom if it was just an ensemble movie. It was just one of many cast members for the film. The script, it's gotten a lot of criticism over the years for being a little too over the top, a little too corny, not being as polished. But I think the script is honestly pretty great. I think it's a good script. I think it's a screenplay that doesn't get enough credit. I've seen a lot of people criticize it for not having enough conflict. I'm like, this has like a ton of conflict. The opening sequence deals with Cougar, John Stockwell's character, and Cougar is a character who is briefly seen in the movie, but he's a guy who's losing it. He's starting to lose his not necessarily his grip on reality, but he's starting to bug out because he's thinking too much about his kid and his wife, and it's causing him to stress out. And that leads to the sequence where Maverick has to come in and save him. And that opens the door for Goose and Maverick to join the Top Gun school. And initially, Cougar and his co-pilot, Merlin, they were supposed to be the ones that were going to go to Top Gun. But because Cougar bugged out and he quit, he turned his wings in, that opened up the opportunity for Goose and Maverick. Now, what I find to be definitely something that is a pretty solid conflict within all of that is the fact that these two guys, they weren't initially the first choice, so they have to deal with that. And then they have to deal with all the other pilots that are in Top Gun. And they're trying to get the top spot. They're trying to win Top Gun, and the script does a great job making you instantly like Maverick and Goose. And you really like these guys, you root for them, and that makes the conflict that forms between them and the other pilots at the Top Gun school so much more effective, because there's actually a really strong connection when it comes to these characters. So you want them to win. And that's what also makes scenes like Goose's death all the more tragic and all the more powerful, because of the fact that the script does such a great job making you legitimately care for and like Goose as a character and like Maverick. And there's little things that I've always liked. The fact that Maverick doesn't really have anyone else other than Goose. Goose is his family because he's got no one left. And I also like the fact that when the accident happens, when Maverick gets caught up in Iceman's jet wash and Goose dies in that accident, when he tries to eject, Goose sacrificed himself for his friend because Maverick is spinning around. He can't reach the ejector seat. He can't pull the cord. So Goose does the right thing and pulls the cord so they can both get out of there. And something tragic happens and unexpected, and Goose winds up hitting the canopy, and he dies. And that scene never ceases to hit me right in the heart. I've seen this film hundreds of times. I know it's coming, and it still makes me just tear up. I'm kind of getting a little emotional thinking about it, to be honest. And I think that's another reason why this script is so underrated. Like, that's one of the most iconic and memorable death scenes in cinema history. And I think the script deserves more credit for really making that a sequence that was so powerful. And yeah, I know you have random diversion stuff like prior to the moments where things get more serious, like the volleyball scene or the moment where Goose is singing Great Balls of Fire. But I think moments like that just make Goose and make these characters all the more enjoyable to watch. I don't think it's really an issue. And yeah, I know the conflict with the MIGs doesn't really come into play until like the last half of the movie, and it's kind of random. But that never really bothered me because the film had such a good flow and pace to it and had a good speed about it that I don't think it really mattered that the conflict just came out of nowhere. Because in all honesty, that does happen in real life. You know, there are some times where missions just pop up for these pilots, and they just have to think of things to do on the fly and just get ready to do it. And there is no extra preparation. There's no debriefing previously. It's one of those things where, well, we got this mission now, and we've got to do it, and here we go. And I honestly thought there was something poetic about the way that the film ended, because it ends with a conflict with the MIGs in, I think, honestly, the same place. So it opens up with a conflict, a near miss kind of thing with the MIGs and Maverick and Goose. And then it ends with a much more serious conflict with the MIGs in the same place. I thought that was rather poetic. Also, I think the romance in this screenplay is really strong. I've never had an issue with that either. I feel the way that Charlie is written is something that's rather unique for the time, and it's something that one of the producers, I think, was gunning hard for. I don't know if it was one of the producers. It's one of the women that was working at Paramount, and she put her job on the line to make sure that Charlie was not a dumb bimbo kind of character, because apparently that character was more of like a dumb, typical sort of bimbo character, and she wanted her to be smart and capable and able to stand up on her own and go toe to toe or face to face with Tom Cruise or these pilots. And I think that just made the character of Charlie so much more unique when it comes to a lot of these other characters in these kind of films at the time. And I think that was a good choice to have Maverick meet his match, where he meets a woman that's able to match wits with him and isn't intimidated by him, and that just makes him fall even farther in love with her. And I've always felt that was a strong, powerful, romantic relationship. And I think the writers did a good job with that as well. And of course, you got just so many moments that are just instantly quotable for all of time. I mean, I feel the need for speed. The whole confrontation that you see throughout the film with Maverick and Iceman, where, Iceman says that Maverick is dangerous and he flies too crazy, and that's right, I am dangerous. I still don't know what the hell Val Kilmer was doing though with the whole like I I don't know what that was, but it worked. Whatever it was, people still talk about that to this day. And of course, the whole thing where Iceman and Maverick, they have this bromance that blossoms in the finale, and it leads to that just really iconic moment where Iceman tells Maverick, "You could be my wingman anytime," and Maverick tells him back, "Bullshit, you could be mine." Like I love that line. And there's a lot of other lines that are great when it comes to this script. And who knows how much of that was improvised? It could have just been improvised by the cast, but I think a good chunk of it though was written in the script as is. And of course, the action. Like when it's there, it's really exciting. I also love the idea of having these other more established veteran pilots get involved in these training maneuvers and put these young hotshot pilots on a testing ground. So I think that there's a certain excitement to that too, where Maverick and Goose and all these other pilots, they're competing with one another and they're trying to stay one step ahead of these veteran pilots. And I like that dynamic as well. I also, speaking of veteran pilots, I love the dynamic between Maverick and Viper. Um, I think it's Viper, or I could be wrong. It could be the other. Yeah, it is Viper. Jester's the other pilot, the other instructor. Yeah, I love the dynamic between Maverick and Viper. There's a certain fatherly dynamic there. You could see Viper being sort of a father figure for Maverick, and the connection that Viper has with Maverick's dad. I thought that was really sweet, and I thought that really worked. And it's also a film that I think is a little more clever when it comes to some other bits of subtext. I know it gets criticized a lot for how homoerotic it is. I mean, you got two pilots who are talking about getting hard when they're looking at like flight plans. Uh, and there's a lot of stuff, like that one guy who's like, "I want some butts. I want butts." And of course, the volleyball sequence, and there's a lot of just crazy machismo in this film. But I think it was done by design. I think this script is legitimately trying to satirize and poke fun at the just insanely over the top machismo that was so prevalent in films at the time, and not just in films but in society. And I think it's actually more clever than people think when it comes to those moments, because I think it's actually having fun with it. I think it's poking fun at it. I don't think it's trying to sincerely just have these moments of homoeroticism and all this other sort of stuff, and have these guys just be superheated and horny and whatever. I think a lot of that is inherently the way it is because it's trying to be a little subversive. And I could be looking into it a little too much as a fan of the film, but I really don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of stuff you can point out and be like, that's funny. And I think it's intended to be funny. I think it's intended to be a joke. But yeah, I can't really say enough about the script. I think it's a really good script. The film, though, would not be as terrific and as awesome as it is without its cast. Tom Cruise is a supernova of charisma in this film as Maverick, and he made the film. If this movie featured anyone else in this lead role, it would not be nearly as successful or nearly as strong. And it shows that the hunch that the producers had was right on the money. They had their sights set on Tom Cruise from the very beginning. But Tom was reluctant to do the film. Yeah, surprisingly, Tom didn't want to do the movie. So they wound up having to shift gears, and they looked for a lot of different people. Um, here is a list of actors that the producers and then the filmmakers were looking at before they eventually got Tom Cruise to do the movie. You have Patrick Swayze. You have Emilio Estevez, Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, Matthew Broderick, Sean Penn, Michael J. Fox, Scott Baio, Tom Hanks, Charlie Sheen, Jim Carrey, Rob Lowe, Kevin Bacon, Eric Stoltz, Robert Downey Jr., and even John Travolta. They were actually strongly considering John Travolta, but he asked for too much money. So they circled back to Tom Cruise. And Jerry Bruckheimer wanted Tom so badly that he called up the Navy, got the Blue Angels to agree to take Tom up for a flight maneuver session. And they're taking Tom Cruise up there, and he's hitting 5Gs, he's throwing up, and for a lot of people that would be the sign that they're not going to do the movie. Not for Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, as soon as he got back onto the tarmac, as soon as he got out of that plane, he ran to the nearest payphone, called up Jerry Bruckheimer, and said, I have to do this movie. I'm in. Because Tom Cruise is Maverick. Like, he is dangerous. And it was just a perfect fit. He was the perfect actor to pilot this film. And I know they were close to getting Matthew Modine, but he turned it down because of the film's politics, which he wasn't a fan of. And I know there were other actors that were reluctant because this film was essentially a advertisement for the Navy. I mean, that's the big reason why it was able to use real F-14s. It was able to have the full cooperation of the Navy because of the fact that they were intending this to be a recruitment ad. And it's a really effective recruitment ad. It caused a boom in young men signing up for the Navy. And I think it's more than just an effective recruitment ad, too. I know some people think it's just a hollow recruitment ad for the Navy, and to each their own, but I think it's an effective film in numerous different ways, and a big reason for that is definitely due to the cast. Tom Cruise is just, like I said, he's a supernova of charisma in this film. Kelly McGillis, she's no slouch either as Charlie. I really felt that she had some really electric chemistry with Tom Cruise. You really bought the romantic tension between the two of them. And I know that Kelly McGillis apparently didn't get along with Tom Cruise while she was shooting this movie, and she didn't get along with him that well afterwards. But none of that really came through when it comes to their scenes together. I really bought that those two really fell for one another, and they were two characters who took each other's breath away. Now, I know that there were other actresses that were also considered to play Charlie. You had Deborah Winger, Brooke Shields, Ali Sheedy, Carrie Fisher, Tatum O'Neal, Jodie Foster, Daryl Hannah, Diane Lane, Linda Florentino, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Linda Hamilton. But ultimately, the role went to Kelly McGillis. Val Kilmer, he's also in this, of course, as Iceman. the top student at Top Gun and Maverick's rival throughout the film until the film's finale, where they become friends and he becomes Maverick's wingman. Val Kilmer initially didn't even want to do this movie. He only did it because he was contractually obligated to, because he signed a deal with Paramount. But he quickly realized that he was a part of something special, and he gave it his all. And to me, Val Kilmer's performance in this film as Iceman, it's not only something that's just cool and just legitimately badass, but he perfected the performance of a character who's kind of an asshole, but not in such a fashion that you don't like him. You still liked Iceman. There's something about him that you were drawn to and you really did admire, and you were able to put up with some of his other more questionable kind of behavior as a result. And there's been a lot of films since Top Gun that have tried to have their own Iceman, and I don't think it's ever really come close because of what Val Kilmer brought to the role. Anthony Edwards, of course, is amazing as Goose. He had just instant, just iconic and just indelible chemistry with Tom Cruise. You bought that him and Tom were longtime friends and loved each other like brothers, and every scene that they were in together was just absolutely stupendous and just loads of fun to watch because the two were just such a great pair. And Anthony Edwards was good on his own too, and he was good in the scenes with Meg Ryan as well. Tom Skerritt, great addition to the cast. He was stern, he was stoic, but he was a perfect pick to play Viper. He was able to have moments where he would be a little more laid back, but also moments where he'd be serious and be a believable teacher for these pilots, and also a believable father figure for Maverick. Tom Skerritt was not necessarily the first choice to play Viper. In fact, the producers, they looked at potentially Louis Gossett Jr., surprisingly, who went on to play Chappie in Iron Eagle. And they also thought of Jon Voight. They thought he might be a good fit for the role. And I think he could have been. I think Jon Voight could have done a great job. And Michael Ironside, he was also really cool. He did a great job as Jester. It was really fun to see Michael Ironside in a role like this. He didn't play a bad guy. Like, he was a good guy, technically, in this movie. John Stockwell, he's alright as Cougar. You know, he's an actor who honestly is at his best in small doses, and he does a decent enough job playing the role that he's asked to do here. Barry Tubb is also in this as Wolfman. Rick Rossovich, he has a fun little role as Slider. Tim Robbins, yeah, that Tim Robbins, he's in this as Merlin. You have Clarence Gilliard, who plays a character named Sundown. Like, for years, I didn't know that was the same guy who played Theo in Die Hard. So it was cool to see him in this movie. I was like, oh yeah, that's Theo. That's the quarterback is toast guy from Die Hard. Whip Hubley, he played Hollywood. James Tolkan, Strickland himself from Back to the Future. He has a really memorable small role as this commander of the aircraft carrier. You mess this one up, Maverick, and you'll be flying crates full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong. Yeah, he's definitely a hoot in his role. Meg Ryan, she did a good job too as Carol. Honestly, really nice early performance by her when it comes to her career. And Adrian Pastar has a bit role in this too as one of the pilots, but you rarely see him in any scenes. But yeah, overall, just a really, just absolutely stellar cast. The film features some excellent editing by Chris Levinson and Billy Weber that's really evident during the film's riveting dogfight sequences. The cinematography by Jeffrey L. Kimball is also really impressive and just an incredible feat to watch. It's just some absolutely gorgeous looking shots in this film. Uh, just even just simple stuff of Maverick riding around on his motorcycle at at dusk. I just love the way that those scenes are shot, and it's just a really well shot film, and it just looks fantastic. And I think Jeffrey L. Kimball just had a great uh, rapport with Tony Scott in terms of what Tony Scott's vision was for the film. And I want to mention the stunt pilot, photographer, and Art Shaw, because Art Shaw is honestly one of the most important parts of Top Gun, because a lot of these sequences, they're shot with these F-14s. A lot of that was shot by Art Shaw, and he was a unique, one-of-a-kind talent when it comes to a director shooting these kind of sequences and putting his life on the line to get these shots. And the film is dedicated to him for a reason, because he gave everything to Top Gun, including his life. He was shooting a scene, something went wrong, and he crashed into the ocean, and he died. But he died doing what he loved, and he just left a legacy that is going to live forever, because this film broke new ground when it comes to aerial photography. No one had ever seen anything like that before on film. And it looks as good as it does, not just because of Tony Scott or the cinematographer, but because of art. You know, he really just delivered and shot these sequences in ways that were just pure adrenaline rushes. And speaking of shooting these scenes, I mean, they went all out. I mean, the studio contacted Grumman, which is a well-known camera company. They had them create new cameras to shoot specific scenes in this film, because no one had ever attempted to do anything like what they ultimately shot for Top Gun. So, yeah, there were a lot of risks, and there were a lot of things that were put on the table when it comes to this movie to make sure that it came out on top, and it all paid off. Of course, you can't talk about Top Gun without mentioning the score by Harold Faltermeyer. This score is just spectacular. It's a stupendous score. It really does help the film fly even higher. From the opening sequence during the opening credits on the aircraft carrier, to the various different other sequences at the Top Gun Academy, to the finale with the showdown with the MiGs and all of the aerial dogfights, all the way down to the more somber and emotional sequences that are very heavy and rife with emotion. I think a large reason why the sequence where Goose dies is so effective comes down not just to the actors or the script or Tony Scott's direction, but to Harold Faltermeyer's score in that scene. That score by itself, the track Memories, is so evocative of just grief and sadness just on its own. So, yeah, I think that sequence would still be very strong if it didn't have Faltermeyer's score, but I don't think it would be nearly as powerful. So, it's one of those things where Faltermeyer just did a fantastic job elevating this film and just increasing its size and its scope and its hold on the audience. There's a reason why this score is still beloved to this day. There's a reason why the opening theme really just sparks a lot of just nostalgic memories for a lot of fans for this film, and just does such a great job just pumping people up. Like it's one of the best scores out there when it comes to lifting you up as well as bringing you down. Interestingly enough, like the track where it leads into Danger Zone, like really gets you all pumped up and ready to go, but then the track Memories just brings things down to earth and really grounds the film. And yeah, it's a very just special and just fantastic score, and it is really just crazy to me that it's never been officially released in its entirety. And I can't mention the film's score without mentioning the soundtrack. This soundtrack slaps. I love every song on this soundtrack, which is why it's my favorite soundtrack of all time. You got Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins, which is a classic. You've got Playing with the Boys by Kenny Loggins, which is another classic. You've got Take My Breath Away by Berlin, which won an Oscar. You have other really fun, memorable, great songs from the soundtrack, like Mighty Wings by Cheap Trick, and even other songs like Destination Unknown by Marietta, Lead Me On by Tina Marie. Um, yeah, there's just so many just great tracks from that soundtrack. It was a smash hit. It was one of the biggest, most successful movie soundtracks of all time, and for a very good reason. And what's kind of crazy about it is that Giorgio Moroder wrote and pretty much put together most of the songs on the soundtrack, and he was doing it, I think, while he was like on vacation, and a good chunk of the songs were written by his mechanic. It's crazy. It's insane that the soundtrack was that good considering the circumstances. To sum it all up, Top Gun, to me, it mainlines adrenaline and excitement. And to quote Tony Scott, it's the purest form of escapism. It's a really terrific and just awesome escape from reality. And I know that it's not the most realistic film. I know that there are things about it that are a little too over the top or might even be considered silly. But one thing that Top Gun is undeniably entertaining and enjoyable to watch. It's arguably one of the most enjoyable and entertaining films of its type. And that's something that I think really does help Top Gun continue to soar and fly as high as it does after all these years. And will make it so it continues to do so as the years go by, because it just had that lightning in a bottle quality. It caught that magic in the air.